Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hockey Writers Ice Time, where we dive into some of the big ideas around the NHL. I'm Mike Fink, and I'm joined by Stefano Rubino, who's been on a few times, covers a lot of the teams here at the Hockey Writers, and a lot of teams in the playoffs, and also covers the AHL. But we're not here to talk about the AHL. We're going to talk about the Stanley Cup Playoffs, which are the first round's underway. Stefano, how are you doing? We're 4 or 5 games in for a lot of these teams. How are things?
I'm doing pretty well, and I gotta say, I did my little Stanley Cup bracket picker the NHL does every year. I had a couple good ideas on what I think could win. So far, a lot of series are going my way, but when it came to guessing how many games the series would be resolved in, a lot of them aren't going the way I thought they would.
I wonder. It seems it's a little bit of a mix where it feels last season was all chalk. It was just like one
Yeah.
seeds winning, and you had 2 seeds except for the one upset was the Avalanche Jets, and you could say that wasn't even an upset to begin with, but
Yeah.
it was basically a chalk. This one's a mix because I think you have some series that are going close and some that are pretty much chalky and 3-1 series already or getting out of hand. With that in mind, I actually want to start with that, which is what are your overall impressions of the first round so far? What stands out? Because I wonder, is this a series that's exceeding the hype? Is it a series? I mean, is this a first round that's exceeding the hype, or is it living up to it, or is it even underwhelming a bit? Because I do wonder. Heading into the weekend, I had one thought. Now I have a kind of a different thought heading out of it.
I don't know. Look at the first round. There's always there's a talk of the 1 versus 16 bracket and how things should change. But when you looked into the first round, you saw a lot of matchups that on paper looked very advertisable to the NHL. Battle of Ontario, it's 3-1. Can Ottawa do it? You got the fourth edition of the Edmonton Kings version. That was 2-2. Last night I thought it was going to be 3-1. Edmonton brings it back again. Montreal's in the playoffs. That could have been a 2-2 series, but they made some mistakes that turned into 3-1. Avalanche Dallas. I thought that game could have been a 3-1 right now, but Avalanche made some mistakes and it's 2-2. So, there's a lot that are really going the distance, are going to be a series. There's no sweeps as of my understanding right now. A
There
lot of
won't be a
series
sweep either.
yeah.
Yeah.
There still could be some 5-game series, but we're in for a lot of potentially 6-7 game series. And if you're the NHL, you want that as much as some fans wanted a sweep. You love when your team sweeps. It's confident. You show great skill. Move on to the second round easily. For advertisers and NHL fans that aren't certain fans, they want to see 7 games of just physical, fast-paced hockey, which we're seeing across the West and East. So right now.
It is interesting that you say the fans want this because they do, obviously. A 7-game series goes the distance, a lot of back and forth games, a lot of close games. They want that. It's interesting because when you see some of these series that go the distance, the teams next round don't look as good, and the next round maybe isn't as good. So I wonder maybe in the big picture if that's a good thing or not. But one of the things that I'm noticing, you touched up on this a bit, is the first round. We've got a lot of these series that are one-sided. A 3-1 series, there's no other way to put it. It's one-sided. I think the one exception, and I'll say this is the one exception, is Ottawa versus Toronto, where 3 games go into overtime. Actually, 3 games go into overtime. Game 1 was, you could just basically write that off as just the outlier in this series. But otherwise, you're looking at a series where 3 different bounces, and we're talking about Ottawa has a 3-1 series lead. That's the one series that I'll say it's a 3-1 series, but it's not really because it's a lot closer, I think, than the final outcome indicates. I mean, we'll credit Toronto because their ability to finish games. They blow these late game leads, which they've done. They blew 2 of them, game 2 and game 3. They had a lead in the third period, gave it up, and then they won overtime. So you have to give them credit for finishing the job. They didn't do it in game 4, and that's all that really matters, is looking ahead. But otherwise, I mean, there's a few of these good series. Dallas, Colorado, I thought it was going to be, I mean, everyone did. Not everyone, but a lot of people, they saw coming in, it was going to be Jason Robertson out, Miro Heiskanen out. Okay, so we're like Avalanche in 4, Avalanche in 5. They won game 1. We're like, okay, this is going to be a close series. And credit Dallas. Dallas has a lot of elite talent, and they are making this a series. And it's one of the better series. There's a handful of very good series that are going on, especially the 2-2 ones, where you look at Vegas and Minnesota, you look at Edmonton and Los Angeles, the Kings, the out west. Those are good. So I mean, that's the overall first impression I get. I'll actually ask you about whether it is better that we are getting these series that some of these series that go the distance, if it's better in the big picture, because a part of me does think that if you trim the fat, if you get rid of the bad teams in the first round, you take care of them easily, you set up better hockey down the stretch, whether it's the second round or the conference finals or even the Stanley Cup final, versus when you get these series that go the distance, all of a sudden they head into the second round banged up, not ready for a series against the team that did take care of business, and you end up getting, I guess, a worse playoff bracket as a whole. I'll ask you, that's such a broader question to ask, but I will ask you about that. What do you think of that?
I can definitely understand, when you look at the big matchups, you obviously want to see the big heavy hitters of any playoffs show near the final end. That's the whole point of playoffs, that as the rounds progress, we see the better teams. We see the best teams face off against each other. If they won the division, if they won the top of their conference, they get the easy wild card one who just squeaked in. And that's great to hear because they had a great season because they're young, or their team that just came off a rebuilding season, and like a Minnesota per se, how when they finished the season, it's cool that they just got Kaprizov and Joel Exernak back, but they dropped from almost the second spot in the Central to wild card one, fearing Calgary in St. Louis of losing that spot. And you look at the series now, it's 2-2, and you go, wait a second. They were supposed to be, I had Vegas in 5. I thought, it was going to be fun. It was good to see Kaprizov back and playing because they looked great all of a sudden. Now they forced Vegas into a series of potentially 7. So you go, okay. And you start looking at the differentials of the West versus the East. And you go, okay, West, every series is 2-2. You could have made a lot of stipulations of Colorado should have been 3-1, potentially a sweep. If Los Angeles didn't blow 2 games, they could have been done last night. Where you look at the East and you go, Florida potentially has the chance to put the series in 3-1, just like every other team. Every other series is on a chokehold where, yes, we know 3-1 leads aren't, you won the series, you got to win 4. And certain teams have a history of blowing 3-1 series leads, but they have the chokehold. They have 3 games to win 1 game, and the series is over. And so you really think, we love Montreal, Big 6. Mm-hmm. If Washington took care of them in 4, we knew we all want always to succeed. That's one more round that he can go in, get some more rest. He's ready to go. Make the push for Carolina, who's up 3-1. And that's where I think a lot of people want to see the 1-16, to where, yes, they see the 16, the 15, the rebuilding teams finally start to succeed, but they have to verse against a Colorado, Vegas, whoever, and say, hey, it's not your time yet. 5-6 games, get it over with.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that not just in the Eastern Conference that the series are 3-1. They're one-sided, like pretty much. Yeah. I mean, Carolina, the Devils versus the Hurricanes, it's been all Hurricanes. Like, yeah. I mean, the Devils won in overtime, but and Washington, as much as Montreal's played, they played well. They played well in the series. Washington's controlled things. I think the one thing that people are still skeptical about is just the injuries in that series, especially in goaltending. So you see backup goaltenders who's got the better backup, and maybe Montreal does, and that's where the intrigue is. I think what's in the it leads into an interesting storyline in the playoffs right now, which has been injuries. I think that's the other big storyline where it was the big story, one of the big stories all season, just because of how many players went down and were out for a significant amount of time. You look at like Austin Matthews is out, Ovechkin was out, and didn't really phase him because he still broke the scoring record. Just proves how good he is. But he was out for a decent amount of time, and you could mention, the list goes on. Drew Doughty before the season started. Just the list of star players, and not even star players, just players overall getting hurt, was a storyline all season. And now in the playoffs, we're seeing it come back again, and it's becoming a big storyline. And it's interesting because I have there's always the question. I mean, that's part of why some people like the first round better, because the teams are healthier. You get the healthiest version of these teams playing against each other, compared to at the end of the road, they're more banged up. But what do you make of the injuries happening earlier, and what this does to some of these teams that now have to deal with them, where all of a sudden it's like, yeah, Logan Thompson's out. Now you have to pivot around that, or you insert fill in the blank whatever star player you want to mention. I mean, with the Stars, that just leading right into it, the Stars don't have Heiskanen and Robertson. It's like, okay, you have to pivot on the fly with that. So I wonder what you make of just the injury bug, which is still a thing we knew was going to be a thing, but now it feels like a more of a storyline, especially in the first round. What you make of that?
Yeah, the injury bug was definitely one of the big things around the league, especially when it came to certain matchups. Obviously, Dallas, Colorado was the biggest one. Of you finish your last season, game 82, and you see Jason Robertson leaving the game in a boot. Not a sling, not a cast, but a boot, which means there's some structural damage to that foot. And they announce he's out week to week. So even if they do come back to Dallas, you have no clue when they potentially verse either St. Louis or Winnipeg, if that's even a question. Heiskanen is still considered day-to-day. He took part of skating, but we don't know if he's going to be ready for Game 5. You look at St. Louis. They've been hot, young, fast. Imagine if they had Dylan Holloway. Edmonton, they had struggles. They had to come into Vander Kane Game 3. Why don't they had him 1 and 2? And so you look at these injuries, and it's easier, per se, to come into a series with an injury than be in the conference or Stanley Cup and lose someone. I thought Aaron Ekblad, being drug tested and being suspended was going to be a big hit for Florida. I really thought they were going to lose a valuable defenseman. And, Nate Schmidt comes in like nothing, and he's one of the top scorers in the league for power in goals. And you go, wait a second, but you don't have Aaron Ekblad. Gustav Forsling is still a great defenseman, but it's like there's no missing. And so you look at some of the teams and what they're able to do and replace these guys, have certain guys step up. And Florida's been able to do it. St. Louis been able to do it. Dallas, there's really big minutes. They're playing Thomas Harley a lot of minutes, over 32 minutes a game, and it's showing. Granted, he could have come back game 5, potentially game 6. We'll see if Colorado's able to close the series, but it depends how long the series go and how big of injury the player can be. And that's where you see teams that if they're good enough, they'll have guys step up, like their trade deadline acquisitions, or guys that just show up when they need to, whether it be one game or one series or the whole playoff run. And that's what really can determine a good team from a Stanley Cup team.
And I think what's another layer to this is winning the battle versus the war, which is like, I mean, that's a cliche line where it's, oh, they won the battle. You want to win your series. And I think what's interesting about some of these injuries, you have to build your team and prepare with the long game in mind. Yeah. And I think you look at some of these teams that they want to win their series, obviously. And it's sometimes, case in point with the Stars is that they're going to play Thomas Harley as many minutes as they can. When you have a star player, when you have an elite talent like that on your defense, and he's really not your only one, but when Heiskanen's out, he's your two-way player that could really make an impact across the board. You want to play him all these minutes. At the same time, in the long run, is that the beneficial thing? Is considering how long the playoffs are, how long each series also is, and that series is going to go the distance. I think what's interesting is you look at the other end of things, and this is an interesting point on the injuries. And the opposite side of things is Gabriel Landeskog returns, and they don't play him on the top line or top 6 minutes right away. And people were wondering, oh, well, if he's good enough, why not play him right away, or why not bring him on the ice right away? And it's no, you need to think of the long game in mind, even if he is ready to play, which he's been working up to this really for 3 years, which is really impressive. Like one of the more impressive stories in hockey, or in all sports for that matter, just coming back from an injury like that. But you want to think of the long game in mind. And he obviously, when he went back in the day, he was a top line player, and you want him to play top line minutes. Right now, it doesn't make sense. And you might lose a few games. The Avalanche might lose between game 5 and 6. They might lose one because Gabriel Landeskog does not play north of 15 minutes, or maybe he plays 10 minutes and it's like, okay, that's it. Or they put him on for power play, but they don't play him regular shifts, whatever it is. But you got to think of the long game in mind. And I think that's it's interesting for a few reasons, because I think what's interesting about this is that you want, as a coach, you have to manage your lineup, which is big, which is you don't want to overwork your players early on, but even if you have elite talent, you can't in the first round run them into the ground. I think it's kind of what's interesting. I kind of wonder what you think of just that idea where you want if you're a coach and you have these elite talents, I mean, McDavid and Draisaitl, I guess you could take them out of the curve just because they're so acclimated. They're acclimated to playing 30 minutes anyway, and playing in the playoffs for them is not much different. But for some of these teams, I mean, you can even look at the Maple Leafs. Where are they running? I don't know the ice time for them per se, but I think that's actually one of the things that you're noticing is that they are overworking Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner. But what do you think of these types of how do you manage? I'll ask it like this: how do you manage your team in the first round, knowing the long game, knowing that it's a long playoff run?
Yeah, obviously we're gonna see. Usually we see more defensemen than we see forwards, especially when it comes to logging the ice time, just because of how important the defenseman position can be. For Colorado, it's been this usual suspects, usually around over 20 minutes a game. Taves, McCarr, McKinnon, Natchez, and then Nichushkin. It'll be Landeskog both times have been averaged around 13 to 15 minutes. I think last game was 14 minutes. And if you can get 14 minutes from a guy who hasn't played professional hockey in 2 years, I think that was great. He was arguably the best player in an absolute stinker of a game 3. He looked fast, physical. He was hitting as well. And we go back to the teams, and you go, this is where there's times where it's going to be you're down 2-1, or it's going to be a game where you have no offense. The goaltender standing on his head, so you're going to have to double shift McKinnon, double shift Matthews, double shift McDavid. And one of the graphics I remember watching ahead into Game 4 of the Toronto game was one of the best times they're able to really capitalize on the line management was when Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner and everyone was playing under 20 minutes, and the bottom 6 guys like Steven Lorentz and Yali Yankrok was playing just around 10-11. So if you can have your depth playing 10 to 12 minutes a game while your top guys are playing 19-20 minutes and you're winning, that's a recipe for success where you're getting productive value from your 4 lines while you're not draining them in the first round, ready to say, hey, you ready to play Florida next round? Or you're ready to play a hot team like potentially St. Louis, who just came off, let's say, a potential upset against Winnipeg. So you're going to have to do what you have to do to win series. But I think a good coach, like you said, is going to really be able to determine how they can stretch lines when they need to, when they need that offense, or when they know that they can play these guys and trust in their third and fourth lines to either hold the lead or have confidence in them due to their general manager being able to go out and get assets to improve their depth and have them say, hey, Matthews, Marner, you're playing a little longer, but it's not until let's say the 5-6 minute mark. If we're still down, we're going to keep rolling these lines. And until then, get ready for a normal shift. Until then, you're going to go in double if we're still down. So I think that's really what helps.
I think what's interesting about, we're talking about Matthews and Marner, and I think what's interesting about the Maple Leafs, and this is something that I was trying to explain, why is this Maple Leafs team different? Why does it feel different this time around? And what really is the difference between Craig Berube and Sheldon Keefe? And I think you're basically hitting the nail on the head, which is Berube knows, first of all, he knows about the long game. He's done it before, and he knows about getting a team over the hump. But the big part is that you're looking at this team, and it's not just the top 4. They've obviously been the key contributors. I think they've scored 40% of the goals that the Maple Leafs have scored in the playoffs. My math's not great, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but they've scored a big percentage of them. But it's not just them. It's not the depth. And you look at the ice time, or you look at who's playing. He's managing that lineup where you're not running the stars into the ground. You're not relying only on your star players, and you're giving a lot more ice time to some of these players, and especially in the first round, it makes a huge difference. And I think, the interesting point is that the Florida Panthers might be their next opponent, or even if it's the Lightning, John Cooper, both those coaches know how to manage their lineups. Yeah. They know that early on you've got to get depth contributions, and when needed you can put your stars in more, but early on you especially need to have your depth step up and play your depth more, and knowing you're going to play, well, first in Florida and Tampa, they're going to play the Maple Leafs probably next. I mean, it's not a done deal yet, but assuming that the everything aligns that way, and Maple Leafs same thing. If they win their series, they know they're getting Florida, and they know they're getting Tampa. They know that's a series you're going to play. Obviously, you're going to play in tight games, but which you already have. But you're going to need your star players to step up and take over those matchups, and you're going to have them then, and you're not going to have them worn down, which frankly they were in the second round 2 years ago when they upset the Lightning. That was the big thing. Everyone's like, okay, now it's their chance to go on a run, but they were depleted. They didn't show up against the Panthers, and they had no mileage. They couldn't. So it's interesting. I mean, it's just another thing to add to why coaching's so important in hockey and in playoff hockey, where some people say like, oh, coach doesn't add that many wins to your team, and especially during the regular season, they're like, oh, 3-4 wins. How much does a great coach make a difference? Great coaches make a huge difference in the playoffs. Yeah. I mean, you're noticing it. You're noticing in the first round when Knobloch making the decisions, and with goaltending where he's done his stuff there, you're noticing it. And with injuries becoming more of a thing, you're noticing great coaching stepping up, and great coaches know what to do, and they know how to handle it. Let's shift gears a bit because we're actually taking up a lot of time on our first topics, and let's do we'll play a game a bit. We'll do a similar. Last week we did Overreaction Monday, so we'll do a similar version to it. But because I couldn't differentiate what people saying overreaction or not overreaction, we'll just say I'll just say a thing. I'll just mention a team, and you tell me if it's panic, time to panic, or you could just say calm if you're calm about them. I'll mention the team, and you tell me panic or not, or calm for them. Yeah. Let's start with the Winnipeg Jets. Calm or panic?
I'm panicking. The third year straight that we're seeing Connor Hellebuyck really disappear in the playoffs. You know, game one, I thought was going to be something in the series where they kind of showed in the Avalanche series, where even with a relatively bad goaltending game, the offense was able to get them back in the game and wheel them through. Game two then showed maybe the series is different than the Avalanche. They changed. Big win. Hellebuyck looked great. They went to home, and he returned back to normal selves. And they're all, as I said before, all these Western Conference teams are heading to a pivotal game 5 that can really help to change the series. And if St. Louis comes out with that same energy and Hellebuyck starts letting in these bad goals, it's going to be panicking.
There's going to be a lot of nervous tension in Winnipeg in game 5 for game 5. There, you're gonna feel it. I was originally going to say I'm going to be calm about them, but no, it's not just that they lost games 3 and 4 on the road, because road team, they're a road team. They're going into St. Louis. It's a tough place to play in the playoffs, and you knew the Blues are going to bounce back. It's the fact that they lost. Well, both games were just terrible showings, across the board, and it's the fact that they're losing these games. It's just even the offense doesn't show up, and obviously Hellebuck's imploding now, and it's the fact that he gets pulled twice. That's the reason to panic. Game 5 is going to be a tense environment. I mean, if they win game 5, you're all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, you're back to you're feeling fine about them. Games 1 and 2, what made it so impressive is that they were winning in a variety of ways. They won a high scoring game, they won a low scoring game. So you're seeing a Jets team that can go on a run. Now you're kind of concerned, you're kind of panicking, and it's going to be tense. Speaking of tense environments, let's talk about another team. Toronto Maple Leafs, calm or panic?
I'm gonna be calm. I know that the second everyone saw game 4 lost, they go, it's gonna be Ottawa all over. It's gonna be Montreal all over again. They're gonna go home. You think it's gonna be good, and it's not. It's gonna go back to Ottawa. They're gonna stomp, and then they're gonna find a way to choke in 7. The series has shown that is a different Ottawa team. You got a different, Toronto team. All kudos to Ottawa. They've fought back. This could have been a sweep, barring all these overtimes. It could have been a 1-minute overtime where they just didn't decide to play defense and nothing. This is a different Toronto Maple Leafs team. We're seeing with Anthony Stolarz in net that even if they go on stretches of offensive droughts, that they have a capable goaltender that can say, I'm in net, guys. Don't worry. There might be a fluke goal in there that just happens, but you're not going to be like an Ilya Samsonov or a Jack Campbell to where, I got to worry about some little stinker going through 5-hole or some sort of odd man rush and him panicking, playing one side too late and having to worry about the defender off the attacker off the right. The goaltending is there. Yes, I can relate because they had a 4-minute power play heading into overtime, just like Colorado Avalanche did in game 3. and they failed to capitalize on it. So yeah, it sucks. It hurts, but I think this is a Toronto team that's going to come home. And yes, it may not be 5, but I think the Ottawa Senators are going to eventually lose just because of how different this Toronto team is.
The game 5, I kept saying it's gonna be a tense crowd. It's one of those where they're until the first goal is scored, where they're just gonna be waiting to erupt. But there's gonna be that feeling of, okay, is Ottawa starting to find their footing? Because they have played them tight. It's been 3 overtime games in a row, and 2 of those games where it's like, okay, one more bounce, and we're talking about the Senators having a 3-1 series lead,
exactly,
and not the Maple Leafs. So you could see, okay, the Senators really, and they have the pieces there. It's not just that, they're fluke goals, and Jake Sanderson's playing well. Brady Tkachuk's had a few big goals in the series, and he had a big hit in game 4. That hit that set up the goal in the third period is one of those plays that, if the Senators make the comeback, that's like the highlight reel they're going to keep showing. But I digress. Overall, though, we said it earlier, the Maple Leafs, this is a different team. I would stay calm for now. I mean, Craig Berube probably brought the team over and said, okay, we lost that one, but we can win.
On to the next
kind of thing. And I mean, if you lose game 5, then you could start panicking. Then you can start getting concerned because
going back to Ottawa.
But you have to add, it's been 11 years since the last reverse sweep. It was Kings coming back against the Sharks, and there's only been 4 of them in playoff history. So 4 reverse sweeps. So a lot of this tells you to stay calm. I would stay calm, and I would for now I would say don't worry. This Maple Leafs team's different. They'll take care of business. And they should take care of it at home. Not then you start worrying, but otherwise, I think you're fine. Let's go to the Panic Series, because I think I'm going to call this the Panic Series. I don't know if you're thinking that this is the same, thinking in your head the same thing that I'm thinking, but I'm calling this the Panic Series just based on, like, depending on what period you're watching is based on which fan base is panicking.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you about I'll just throw both teams out there, and you tell me calm or panic. You can just tell me for both teams, but Kings and Oilers, because I think just depending on when you tuned in or when you're on Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever people are posting their emotions on these days, I don't really know which one's the best one for that, but you could tell one fan base would panic and the other fan base would be calm, and then the other way around. But it's a 2-2 series for both teams. What are you thinking? Calm, panic, a little bit of both, or just panic across the board? What are your thoughts?
If I had to put one team on panic, it'd have to be Edmonton. I know the Kings' bad reputation so far of both losses are blown leads. Yeah, that is absolutely awful, and that shows a lot of determination from the Edmonton Oilers, where it could have just been a sweep, where Draisaitl and McDavid did everything they can, and now there's big talks of what they have to do in this offseason with McDavid coming a UFA next summer. But the Kings, as much as a great start, you can't keep blowing these massive leads heading into the third period. My alarm's going off, excuse me. You look at them and you go, yeah, you 3-0 after the first. That's unbelievable start. As much as you can just go, okay, it's like 3-0 in the regular series game, 52, solid, just back check, have fun. You're against the Edmonton Oilers with Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. Yes, as much as Stuart Skinner can't save a beach ball, you can't just say, okay, well, we just got to shut down Connor McDavid. So you look at, for me, the Kings offense have had its way with goaltending. They know that they can score on a dime. They need to get their defense shut. Obviously, like the West, repeatedly, they're going to Game 5 in in Los Angeles. And as much as I think it should have been 3-1 heading into Los Angeles, the offense for me for the Kings shows that if they need to score, they can, and Edmonton can't keep burying themselves in these droughts, because let's say they do somehow beat the Kings, and that's great. Are you going to feel comfortable with the lead, let's say, against Vegas, again, down 3-0, where a more defensively responsible team and potentially even better offense like the Kings, or let's say Minnesota win? And so you can't keep playing down every single game, because there's going to be a team either in round 2, rather than the conference finals, and be the cup again, that knows that if they can get a 3-1 lead, by the end of the game, they'll be like, okay, we'll make it 3-1, but that's all you're going to get, and we'll take the win.
Yeah, these teams. That's a good point with the other teams, especially Vegas. I mean, Vegas, who beat the Oilers a few years back, where it's
Mhm.
the Oilers. I wouldn't panic in this series per se, but in the long run, can
Yeah.
this team go on a run? And all season, I've thought, don't worry, they'll be fine. They know. First of all, they know what it takes to make it to the final. I mean, they did it last year. They did it last year, and a few years back they reached the conference final. So
Yeah.
they know it's a marathon, not a sprint. So they kind of,
Mhm.
with that in mind, they know that okay, you're not gonna put all your mileage into the first round, and they also know how to come back from a series where they were down 3-0 against the Panthers and made that a 7-game series and came one goal away. So all season I've been thinking they're fine. They know what it takes. This group has been there before. Don't count them out until they're really in trouble. At the same time, in the long run, there's a lot of concerns here, and that's probably where my panic is with them. And the Kings, it's more of can you take care of the Oilers?
Yeah.
They're the teams had your number, and they should have had this series locked up by now. Where 2 games, it's the blown call, or not the blown call, but the coach's challenge where we talked about coaching earlier. It's challenging that goal and losing that challenge,
Yeah.
and that just flipped the game, and it probably could flip the series where you just talk about the Oilers have all the momentum, and then the past game where just the defense implodes. It's interesting because I look at this series and I'm like, this almost deserves its own segment. So I guess let's actually just try to give it quickly its own segment real quickly.
Okay.
I'll actually give myself some time to let our producer here Matthew add some quick words, but I'll ask you this question and then I'll start talking about it so you can add it, which is, let's talk about Evan Bouchard a bit. And because he's one of those players that really fascinates me, especially in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Because you look at with Evan Bouchard, it's where you look at him defensively. He's been on the ice for a lot of goals this series, and there are a lot of people who want him out of Edmonton. They want him out for a while and ready to ride him out of town. He is an RFA at the end of the season, and I think what's interesting about him is that as much as Oilers fans despise him, and as much as a huge segment of them do, he's the type of player that ironically is what the Oilers need, and what any playoff team needs. You need a scoring defenseman. So I wonder. So like it's almost a two-layered question, which is what does his play tell you about the value of that? Because in the play, they don't win Game 4 without him. As much as he struggled early on, was allowing those goals. He scores too late, and his play from the point really makes a difference. As much as people say, "Oh, anyone could play the point with McDavid and Draisaitl," no, his ability to get the puck to the net makes the difference, and it's made a difference in their cup runs. So, with a playoff team like this, he gets them over them. He's that X factor, especially in these close games. So, I wonder what does his play tell you, first of all, about the value of a scoring defenseman? Because you obviously see the mixed bag on him. That there's a lot of people that want him out for a while and want him out this offseason too. And the other question is, how should, now he's an RFA at the end of the season, how should teams perceive him? Because you know what you're getting with him. I mean, he's now 25. He's hitting his stride as a defenseman. He's starting to. This is really his peak years. But you know that the defense is not there. The scoring is, and I mean, there's going to be the question. People are joking about it already. Like the Oilers are going to put a ton of $10 million into Evan Bouchard or something, and people are going to freak out about that. But if you think $10 million is a lot, there's a lot of teams with cap space that will throw that money at him. Chicago's one of them that they have the cap space and they can throw it at him. And people are going to look at the offer sheets the Blues gave and said, "Why not us?" So I'm just kind of speaking my mind on Evan Bouchard already. But I wonder I should have just said Evan Bouchard thoughts, but I'll just say it again. Evan Bouchard, your thoughts.
It's weird because obviously when it comes to scoring from a defenseman group, obviously I'm a bit grateful for the Colorado Avalanche, as they were, if not the leading team in the regular season to lead teams in scoring by defensemen. Cale Makar, Devontae, Samuel Girard, even Josh Manson when he was healthy have produced offensively very well. And when you look at the teams in the playoffs, like we talked about the Maple Leafs, they had one of the lowest scoring from their defenseman. Morgan Riley, who they thought there was a guy, disappeared. Their whole team, Brandon Carlisle, Jake McKay, Chris Tanev, excuse me, wrong Tanev. They're guys that can produce. They'll give you 20, maybe 30 points a season if they're lucky, but they're not going to be, offensive juggernauts like potentially Morgan Riley can be. They got one of the most, just through their 4 games, they got contributions every single game from their defensemen. And you're thinking yourself, okay, well, how are the Edmonton Oilers doing? And you go, Evan Bouchard's got 7 points. That's great. And then he's a -2 if whatever your stance is on plus minus. You look at Darnell Nurse, -4, 0 points. Again, take what you want from -4.
Yeah.
Evan Bouchard is, I talk with my colleagues and friends. I go, Evan Bouchard giveth and taketh the lead. And we go, holy crap, look at that. As they say, the Bouch bomb. John Carlson-esque, where he's able to, on the power play, everyone's looking at Leon Draisaitl, everyone's looking at Connor McDavid. He's got a heavy one-timer that can send it through the net, and if you need Corey Perry or Evander Kane or Zach Hyman to crash it in front of the net to get it, he can. But then you look at him back-checking on that Fiala goal, where by the time Fiala's passing him, he's still skating backwards and hasn't turned yet. And this is where we look at offer sheets and go, there's going to be a lot of movement this summer with offer sheets, just like you said, through the St. Louis, where teams are going, okay, the cap's going up. I'm not that afraid to potentially move some of these picks because I know I'm going to get a guy that's under the age of 25. I'm willing to pay. So I'm going to free will it. And so you're looking at Bouchard, you're going, okay, cap's going up. Offensively, you can work with McDavid and Draisaitl. You're one of the best that you can. Defensively, it's going to be a pay cut. We want to keep you, but defensively, you need to show better because at the end of the day, you're a defenseman. And that's where the Norris Trophy conversation comes in. It's, hey, we love that you could score points, but there's guys that haven't gotten a lot of love for the Norris who play some heavy defense, haven't voted for the Selke as a defenseman, or the Lady Byng as other ways, where like a Jacob Slavin, where he doesn't get enough credit for his defensive work, but offensively he's scoring 40 to 50 points, which is great, but it doesn't touch the Makars. And so
you have a lot of people with Bouchard who will say he's not a defenseman, he's a forward, kind of the jab there.
And so you're looking at him and you go, okay, well, he deserves to get paid. There is noticeable work that his offensive production with the team helps. Can you put a little asterisk and say that's with the help of McDavid and Draisaitl? Obviously, that's the team, but that's the team. You're not going to get rid of McDavid and Draisaitl and say, okay, Bouchard, go lead the team, because that's not a realistic thing to do. So, that's going to be interesting talks that if there's anything coming out this summer through agents and representatives in the media are saying, they're talking, they want a deal, but they're potentially going to be arguing about 1.5, 2.5 million based off of, hey, we need to build a team around a guy who is a generational player that could potentially leave next summer, and that's going to probably break all contract value in the NHL history, as well as his partner in crime, Leon Draisaitl. So do we give this guy 10 million and then have to spend 3 on another goaltender? Or do we say, hey, take 8.75, take 9, let us get some depth, let us make some changes in goaltending if there's options, and come to a draw to say, hey, do you want to pay or do you want to win?
Yeah, it's so fascinating, all these things, because I think the Oilers are going to have to answer. They always have to answer this question, which is, you have the generational talents on your roster. You have 2 players who could single-handedly take over games, and you're putting a lot of resources into 3 or 4 players. A lot of your cap space is going into a handful of players, and the question is Bouchard part of that? And based on this season, I think you maybe want to pivot. You maybe want to pivot away from that, where you say we need more stay-at-home defensemen, more Matthias Ekholm types. They don't have that. And Matthias Ekholm, by the way, is 30. I think he's 35 now, or 34, 35, and he's going to be a free agent also after next offseason. So you look at the state of the Oilers. They don't have a lot of stay-at-home defensemen. They don't have a lot of that. I mean, Ekholm they have. He's been hurt. Another player who's been out, the Oilers have had to pivot without him, and he really actually makes a huge difference playing alongside Bouchard, just because he cancels out for a lot of his issues. But they're gonna probably have to say we need to make that pivot where we need to have more stay-at-home defensemen, and we need to invest more in goaltending and have Draisaitl and McDavid carry the offense. And then the other part to this, though, is at the same time, if you're thinking of the long game, if you're thinking about a playoff run, Bouchard does make a difference. It's hard to ignore the value he brings in the playoffs. I know he's been on the ice for a lot of goals, but when they need a big goal, when they operating the power play, or when they just control the puck in the offensive zone, if they can rely on him to make that impact. And there's no one on their roster who could do that, and there are not many players in the NHL who can provide that impact. There are players who can get the puck on the net, but not many who can make a difference, first of all, consistently, and second, as well as Bouchard does. So it's an interesting question for the Oilers to answer now. I mean, for now, they still have a big playoff series ahead, but it's going to be an interesting question the Oilers are going to have to answer with Bouchard. And if he gets paid by the Oilers, it's going to be just an incredible reaction to see, because regardless of the number, just because there's going to be a big contingency saying he's not a defenseman, he's a forward, or why are we paying this money? And the other part is, or you're going to see a team like Chicago, or I think the Ducks have cap space. There's a lot of these rebuilding teams that have the cap space, and they could spend big on a defenseman like that. And it's interesting. I keep thinking back to Erik Karlsson, which is having Erik Karlsson on the Sharks when the Sharks are not good is not what you want. Having Erik Karlsson on the Ottawa Senators when they are making a cup run, that makes a huge difference. And I think that's overall what I just keep thinking of, is having that kind of defenseman where it's where you during the regular season, you do not want that type of defenseman on your team. On the contrary, you want defensemen who play both ends of the ice, but also shut down opponents offensively. But in the playoffs, in a series like this, you need a player like him, and it's proven. They're back in this series because of him. I mean, as much as frustrating as it is, I'm talking a bit too much here. So I guess let's wrap up on a light note on a question I thought of over the weekend. Something we don't really talk about. It's not like necessarily related to the games itself, but just something I'm curious to hear your thoughts, which is, what are your favorite playoff aesthetics? Which is like, what is something where you're like, there's nothing like fill in the blank when it happens in the playoffs, and it's just exciting to see that happen in the playoffs. So whether you're at a playoff game or whether you're watching it on TV, what's like a playoff aesthetic that you're like, there's nothing like this?
For me, and it's one of my biggest issues with the broadcasting right now, is the crowds and the crowd noise. Home environments for me is one of the best. As much as I don't like the Jets personally, though I think the whiteout's one of the coolest things they do in hockey. I love just seeing the panning shot to everyone wearing white. And it's something that I'm seeing with the broadcasting, that they're crowning out the crowd noises and the audio and these announcers, which personally you can give or take what you want about certain announcers on ESPN, TNT, Sportsnet, whatever you want. But they're drowning out these crowd noises. I remember growing up as a kid that when a game-winning goal or a big lead comes late in the end, you hear the crowd basically overtake the commenters to where they're raising their voices to speak. And we're seeing these back that obviously we've been so due to COVID, to where we saw no crowd, limited crowd, returning crowd. And now that we're seeing places like Toronto Maple Leafs have their lounge out right outside the ring, right outside the arena, where you see a big sea of blue and fans waiting right outside, and they're going crazy. And so it's a good thing that we're just looking back through the tough times of COVID-19, that we're seeing these crowds really come back, are in full force. They're wearing whatever shirt they're giving out that night, if it's a whiteout in Winnipeg. And just the emotions that we're seeing. Obviously, Gabriel Landeskog coming back. I think when he scored that goal, I think that was the loudest I think I've heard the arena in, just through a broadcasting standpoint, listening to the game, of where it was almost clipping the mic, and you're seeing the raw emotions of not just they scored to take a good 3-0 lead, but as their captain that hasn't played in 2 years. And it's the emotions that we really see that in the crowd of, it's not just they're celebrating a goal, but they're celebrating how he scored and who has scored. And even all the commentators from Altitude Sports, TNT, you hear all of them, ESPN, talk about, who was it? Oh, it was the captain. And the emotion, even the announcer said that I felt so good. And so for me, it's seeing the arena's full again, and the lack of it.
The crowds are a big one. I mean, a lot of these playoff aesthetics are based off the crowd.
Yeah.
But it's actually interesting you mentioned the announcers, because a lot of the best announcers, I think, when a big goal is scored, they often just sit back and just let the crowd,
the horn go off.
Let the horn go off, let the
cheer.
crowd just play. That's what you hear. And it's not just in hockey, but all sports. A lot of the best announcers will sometimes say fewer words when a big moment happens, and it's and try not to talk over the moment. But that's a different story. I'll pick one with that, and what you're talking about, the TV broadcast. I'll pick one from watching at home and then watching in the arena. Which the one at home, which my favorite playoff aesthetic is, you're talking about the broadcasting. It's when you can get two games at once at the staggered times.
Yeah,
where you have a 7 o'clock and a 7:30 start, or 8 o'clock, 8:30, whatever time zone you're in, or whatever times the games are in, whatever time zones the games are in, you get those 7:30s, and you can watch where you can. First of all, the aesthetic of watching two games at once, which, like, I mean, some people don't watch two games at once. I do. I have two TVs. I'll be watching two games on, but but that's just me. I mean, I watch a lot of hockey, but the other aesthetic to that is when the first period comes to close in one, you could flip back and you see the second period in the other. You just kind of get that perfect synchronization. There's just this aesthetic, which, especially in the first round, you get, which is just like, it's pretty cool. I mean, not gonna lie about playoff hockey. And the other, I'll just wrap this up with playoff crowds, which is seeing a big, not just playoff crowds, but seeing a big goal late, where the crowd reacts. So whether it's an overtime winner, a home team scoring a goal in the third period, like 5 minutes left, in a game that's tied, or a game that it's a 1-goal game, they like score late, and everyone knows it's a big moment and just erupts. It's actually like it's one of those great feelings. It's one of those things that retroactively I put on my bucket list. I was covering the AHL this weekend. I was in Lehigh Valley when they played Wilkes-Barre. They scored. It was 2-2. They scored a 3-2 goal with like 5 minutes left, and the place just went crazy. They knew that was the game, and they knew that. And there's this feeling. There's really nothing like it. Home crowds in a big moment erupting like that.
So we're seeing that from like Ottawa and Montreal, teams that haven't touched the playoffs forever, that we're seeing prospects after draft picks, develop, come in, change, trade it. And you're like, I want to see what playoff hockey is like. And despite them being down 3-1, they're able to get a win, and they scored goals at home. And seeing these fans, that historical teams that had little to none or a lot of playoff success, but a big playoff drought to the team rebuilding, it's good to see them really get this, show a change of what potentially the future's to come, to where this isn't going to be a one-off thing. The team's ready to compete now, and we're going to see this for years to come.
Yeah, it's really, that's another part to this. Like, having Montreal back in the playoffs, there's like, as much as like we don't root for teams, or we don't want to see certain teams in the playoffs, and I don't root for Montreal. I'm not rooting for them to be in the playoffs. It didn't matter if they were or not. But seeing them back, it's just like, it feels right. It just there's a certain feeling of watching that home crowd, and some other teams, that not just them, but like some other teams also, but like there's a certain like aura when they play at home, and it's really nice to see that as well. And some of these rebuilding teams, it's nice to see them back, where the crowd where they know, like, wow, we're finally back into it. It's really nice to see. All right, that's all we got. We went way overtime, a lot longer than I thought we would. I'm sure Matthew behind the screen is trying not to freak out, because we're almost at an hour now, but that's all we got. Well, thank you, Stefano, for joining. This is a fun conversation.
Thank you very much. I'm obviously love to have it. And hopefully to see me soon eventually again when the Colorado Avalanche beat the Dallas Stars for a round 2 series preview. And I want to break it down on a little news report here that right when we talked about the Pittsburgh Penguins have fired head coach Mike Sullivan.
Whoa.
So I know we want to head it off on a good note about playoffs, but potentially a team that's looking to make some playoff changes to get Crosby back in the playoffs. We're going to be with a different coach next year.
I feel like, should we talk about that? Like, I'm like, wow, this is the first time I'm getting a news break. I don't have Twitter up or whatever.
At 9:10 per the Pittsburgh Penguins, they have agreed to part ways with head coach Mike Sullivan. So we're going to potentially see after a very disastrous year.
Okay, so wow. No, I mean, you kind of had a feeling they were going to do it, but wow, they actually are doing it. Wow, that's crazy. Just quick. I mean, I guess we'll try to quickly wrap up, because I mean, wow, you just like this first news bomb I'm getting live on Ice Time, but just quick reaction to it, which is, I mean, I'll kind of say the first two things, which is that's like the domino that was waiting to fall. I think a lot of teams where you were wondering, are they going to fire head coaches or are they going to hire head coaches? And it was, if Sullivan goes, now all the dominoes can fall, which now you're starting to see maybe a bunch of teams. He's going to get a call right away. And you're going to see the offseason really pick up, which is what direction do all these teams want to head in? Because Sullivan's going to get a job somewhere. It's just a matter of which team is going to hire him. I mean, the Rangers are obviously the team that's going to be linked to him. But maybe he wants to. Maybe there's a rebuilding team that he would really like to go to. Maybe Chicago's that team to keep in mind. But there's a few openings, and I think what's interesting, a lot of teams were kind of waiting because maybe now you're going to see a lot of teams are going to start maybe firing their head coaches or moving on, knowing Sullivan's available.
Yeah,
you want to now open up that spot because as good as your coach is now, to have Sullivan around, especially if your team's a playoff team, that's the interesting part, is that the Penguins were not a playoff team. You cannot blame Sullivan for what they were doing earlier. So just to see, I mean, it's going to be interesting because I think this is like the domino to fall where now you're going to see a bunch of teams that, I mean, I'm not going to say I know anything about any of these other teams, but maybe Nashville all of a sudden is like, okay, now we're going to make our decision because that was the big piece to fall. And now that he's available, all these teams are going to start getting in line for really try to get Sullivan. That's the first thought. And then my other thought, real quickly, I'm talking too much. I feel like I'm giving you enough time to really gather your thoughts here because this is just on the fly. I'm trying to get all this together, which is the Penguins. They're rebuilding, and now it's you're really going into it. I mean, the question next for them is, what do you do about Crosby, Letang, and Malkin, or are they going to be around for the rebuild? Do they want to be around for that? It's going to be a sliding doors moment. Maybe they are, but you really need a pivot. And Carlson, we just mentioned him with Bouchard. Moving on from him is a part of that. Moving on from a lot of these players who are veterans. Otherwise, maybe I don't know. They didn't trade Rickard Rakell this offseason at the trade deadline, and I think he might be a free agent at the end of the season, so it's kind of hard to move him. But you're looking at this team. It's now you're going to a rebuild, and now you're actually Kyle Dubas is actually going to hit that reset button and really try to rebuild here.
Yeah,
they have an intriguing farm. What? Sorry,
I'll
just leave it to you.
Okay. I mean, it was just for me. It was interesting because we saw a lot of rebuilding teams. Anaheim fired the coach. Seattle fired the coach. Rangers fired the coach. So a lot of teams that didn't make the playoffs either due to unexpected seasons that they had home ropes for, or just needed a change in behind the bench, they fired the coach. And like you said, it's gonna be interesting to see with who they want to go through next. Obviously, I can't forget his name off the top of my head, but Chicago's looking for the University of Denver coach. Oh, yeah. And he apparently turned down their offer. So does Pittsburgh now go David Carl? Do they now go to David Carl? Do they go to a younger guy? Obviously, experienced in university, but not a lot of head coaching experience in the NHL. Do you want to go with a younger guy that can be smart enough to help lead Crosby and the forward to their final days while being able to help develop these younger guys? Or do they want to go with another head coach like a Joe Quenneville, a Stanley Cup contender, say, I want to get as much experience as I can behind the bench until Crosby's gone, and then I'll move off into a younger coach, maybe an assistant coach that we really like, or someone from the AHL, the Pittsburgh Penguins. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do this summer to tune the roster.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Penguins. It's interesting, guys. They have an intriguing farm system. They don't have any clear-cut star players in their prospect pool. I mean, I watched a lot of Wilkes-Barre Penguins this season. They've got a lot of good players who, if they called them up to the NHL, they can be good depth players, but not that clear-cut star. I mean, Rucker McGroarty could be a top six forward who can, give you good numbers or give you good production, but he's not the type of player that could take over games. They don't have that. I mean, the way to get that is you either have to spend big in free agency, or you have to draft well, and you have to draft and develop well, and they've developed well. They've actually, it's interesting because Jason Spezza was one of the names that I mentioned as an intriguing GM option because with Wilkes-Barre, he's their GM, and he's kind of, I mean, they were a good team, and he's developed there as well. I mean, you mentioned, what kind of coach they're going to hire. Maybe David Carl will go there. I mean, you're asking David Carl if he could coach Crosby. I mean, he'll probably say, yeah, I'd love to do, even if it's just for a few seasons. But he's going to have to coach a rebuilding team. So, I mean, I don't know if that's the ideal destination for him. But a lot of these teams are now going to be lining up for Mike Sullivan. That's the big story. Really.
Yeah.
The big takeaway is a lot of teams are now going to be lining up. As much as the Rangers were already open, I think the Bruins, you could say they were already open because Joe Sacco was the interim, so they kind of already have a spot available if Sullivan wants to go there. A lot of teams, you're gonna see a lot of these teams now make moves because of that, and maybe even teams that lose in the first round because Sullivan's available. I'm trying to think of. I wouldn't say Montreal or Ottawa if they lose in the first round, they lose in 5, that they would immediately try to get Sullivan. But I'm trying to think of you could think of one of some of these teams and say, okay, maybe they'd be the type of team that would want. I mean, maybe those two are. I mean, it's because I think they're both coaches have done a good job, but maybe they'll just keep that in mind. Say, hey, maybe this spot's open. Let Sullivan's on the board. We need to get him. Yeah. Kind of thing. I mean, the Bruins last season, Jim Montgomery was. The talk was they might have won. I mean, wasn't that the talk that about Jim Montgomery getting fired? No, it wasn't. No, it was the fact that if they went to the second round, so the Bruins didn't fire Montgomery, but if they lost in the first round, there was talk that he would, and a lot of teams were waiting to see if they could bring him in. Yeah, it's a lot of sliding doors moments. The Penguins. I think another name maybe to keep in mind for the Penguins. I mean, this is the name that I've been following because I watch a lot of AHL hockey, is Todd Nelson and Hershey, who a lot of people who follow AHL hockey know he's a great coach, but you wonder when he can get a call somewhere because he checks off a lot of boxes for a good coach, and maybe he's the other rebuilding coach that teams are going to be looking out for. But yeah, it's it's all of a sudden it's a busy week for the hockey community, that's for sure. In case it wasn't crazy enough. All right, now I think that's all we got. I think, Stefano, if there's any news that broke since then otherwise, but thanks for joining, if unless there something else happened, but thank you for joining. This was fun on the fly. We had to quickly prepare, but
I hate to cut you off. Kevin Weeks. We're gonna end this on Kevin Weeks. You could have this another time. Per Kevin Weeks, several team owners, executive and coaches think that with the given revenue of the NHL, think that Mike Sullivan can reset or eclipse $7 million per year as a head coach.
Yeah, I don't think that surprises me. I mean, I think there's going to be a team that will pay. If there's anything to take away from that tweet, if there is any, there's not really a lot of info there per se, but I would say if there's anything to take away from that, it's that, or really just from Sullivan on the market, it's that teams with the ownership groups that are willing to spend, and you know which teams they are. You know which teams have ownership groups that are willing to spend. They're the ones that are going to get Sullivan. Yeah. The teams that cut corners, the teams known for having ownership groups that cut corners and do not want to spend big on whatever it is, especially head coaching, they're not going to get Sullivan. But Sullivan is going to get paid, and that's not going to surprise you. I mean, there's going to be a lot of bidders for him anyway, but that's not really news as much as just like confirmation. Yeah, you're gonna expect that. All right, I guess that's all we got. Stefano, thanks for joining. A bit longer. We actually now are at the hour mark, so a bit longer of an episode. So thanks for bearing with me and tuning and contributing a lot. This was fun.
Thank you very much. Obviously, it's been a fun first couple of weeks. No more news from me, but I'm excited to come on again.
Yeah, even knowing how things work at 11 a.m. We're recording this at 9 a.m. Eastern or 10 a.m. Eastern, whatever time it is now. But knowing 2 in the afternoon, it's going to be huge news again. We're going to miss that, but who cares at this point? We need to let Matthew, our producer, go because he's probably freaking out because we're close to an hour. But that is all we got. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you made it this far, and if you did, please subscribe, like, comment, subscribe. On YouTube, share this episode, give us 5 stars on Apple Podcast. It really would mean a lot to us, and give us a review if you made it this far. And if not, as I say, I don't know how you made it this far. As I keep saying, but if you do and you liked it and you like our reactions at the end, because I was kind of taken aback and kind of shocked by the Sullivan news, so all of a sudden we're pretty busy, but yeah, please give us a like and share our episode, and and give us the full listen. It really means a lot to us. Until then, we'll be back later this week with more Stanley Cup playoff talk, and maybe some news will break, but who knows? It's that fun time of year. A lot is going on. We check out the Substack for a lot of stuff. Stefano and me, we're going to be writing a lot of playoff stuff, a lot of off-season news now as well, and draft news. It's that time of year where all of a sudden everything's starting to pick up, and we're ready for it. We're going to be ready for it. A lot of stuff's going on. So, but until then, tune in next time for another great episode. Thank you.